So now we have a skeleton for our character, but if I rotate this, you'll see it's not actually affecting our character. So we still need to skin the character in order to have it deform the character. Now, before we do this part, it is very important to do some prep first. So all of these pieces are the pieces that make up my model. A lot of people want to combine those, but that's not absolutely necessary. It's fine to have them all separate. But before I do anything, there's a couple of things I want to do, or before I skin it, there's a couple of things I want to do. I definitely want to make sure that I've done my UV unwrapping. So if you haven't done that, just go ahead and pause here. It's all right. You can hide these joints and make sure you've UV unwrapped your object. Because once the object starts moving, it can sometimes mess up the UVs if they've not been completely unwrapped. So once you've skinned the object, you can't go back and create UVs in a very easy way. You would basically have to unskin it and then reskin it again. The other thing is you want to make sure that you've deleted history and frozen your transformations on all of these objects. So I'm going to select all of this and say Edit, Delete by Type, History, Modify, Freeze Transformations. And so now Maya thinks of this as completely new objects. So once we've done that, I can select all of this mesh, I'll hold Control and select the root, and I can go to Skin, Bind Skin. Now I'm going to look at the different options this time. So a couple of things about how skinning works. When we hit the Skin button, Maya assigns vertices to be deformed by different joints. And more than one joint can affect any one vertex. So the knee joint may affect some of these vertices here. Let's go ahead and select a joint so you can see what I'm talking about, or a vertex so you can see what I'm talking about. So these vertices here, they may be partially affected by this knee joint and partially affected by this ankle joint. So how Maya decides that is really the thing that we're changing in these bind settings. So if I go back to Object, let's select all of that stuff again, hold down the root. And so I only have the root joint selected. I don't have all of these joints underneath it selected. And so that is one of the first things it asks us. Does it want to bind to the joint hierarchy or to just the selected joint? So for example, if I had just selected joint, it would only bind it to root. But if I have it set to joint hierarchy, it will bind it to root and everything below root. That's really what I want. Now, the second question is the bind method. How does it decide which vertex to assign to which joints? And in this case, it's the one that's the closest distance. And that's sometimes good, but you'll notice like this, these vertices down here, they may be just as close to this ankle as they are to this knee. And so that's not always the right way either. If I skinned this, there's a chance that one ankle would affect the other ankle, and that doesn't really make sense. I usually like to use closest in hierarchy. I will say that heat map works really well sometimes, but in most cases the model has to meet a whole bunch of different guidelines before it works really well. And currently robots don't, like where robots are made up of multiple pieces, that's one of the things that gives it problems. So the one that usually works the best is probably closest in hierarchy. The next thing we'll look at is the max influence. Now it's okay to leave this at 5, but really what this is saying is how many joints can affect a single vertex. And right now the maximum is 5. And I think that that's all right. So we'll go ahead and hit bind skin. And this is the part that scares most people, is once they've done this, they expect it to just work, and it's not going to. You're going to get some really weird deformations. You haven't done anything wrong. This is how it's supposed to work. This is what happens when you let machines make all the decisions. So Maya needs some more input on this skinning. So, for example, I've not really given Maya any reason to believe this knee shouldn't be affecting the head of this creature or of this robot. Maya's not smart enough to know that this is a robot. It just thinks it's a bunch of polygons. And so when I deform this, you see that I'm getting some deformation on the head, not just the leg. So how do we tell it, no, I don't want the knee to affect any of these vertices? The answer to that is called painting your skin weights. So if I right click and go to Paint Skin Weights tool, you'll see it opens up my tool settings and my model turns gray or white or black. So to explain this, currently I have my root joint selected. What this allows us to do is paint influence for our root joint. So if I wanted the knee to affect my character's forehead a whole lot, I would paint influence into that. Now, the thing that I am painting is either white or black. My warning is to just never use black. Black means you're taking away influence, and that means Maya can put that anywhere it wants to, and it usually makes bad choices. The way you change between white and black is this value. So 1 is completely white. So if I wanted to paint the knee deforming my character's forehead, I could paint white here. And then when I go here and rotate, it's actually my right knee, you'll see that my right knee is affecting my character's forehead. Now, obviously that's not what I wanted. So if I go back to Paint Skin Weights tool, the reason I had you all do robots, or suggested you do robots, is because that makes this skinning process a little easier on certain parts of it. Because I know that the main thing I want to affect this robot's head is the root joint. It's metal, so I don't necessarily want it to bend here. So that means I can go to the root, and instead of painting all of this white, I have the option to just hit flood, and it will flood that entire head with white. So that means now the only thing that is affecting all of the vertices for the head is the root joint. And that means if I rotate the knee now, it's not affecting that blue part of the head mesh at all. I can go ahead and do the same to these as well. Flood. Flood. I'm getting out of the Paint Skin Weights tool by hitting the W key because that just activates the Move tool. Paint Skin Weights tool. Flood. And so now you'll see that if I rotate the knee, it's not affecting the head at all. And if I rotate the head, it rotates all of that. Now, since all of the legs and stuff like that are children of the head, then that's why they're going with it. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do this to all of the objects that don't need to deform, really. So, for example, the toes, right-click, Paint Skin Weights. And I am going to choose the right toe and just hit flood. And I can kind of do this one at a time. For this, the ankle should be controlling all of it. Hit flood. The same with the calf. Paint Skin Weights. Knee. Flood. And the hip. Now, that should mean now that if I rotate my ankle here, you're going to see I'm getting some deformation in the calf. But over here, if I rotate my knee, I'm not. The same with the toe. Seeing how the foot's deforming. Over here, not as much. Okay, so I'll go ahead and go through those again on this side. Okay, so the only things left are these little knee pads and the little hip areas here. Now, I, in my head, wanted these to be like little rubber gaskets. And so right now, when I rotate my objects, they kind of seem like they're deforming like that. But I wanted to show you that like sometimes you need to manually go in and paint some information on this. It's also important to recognize that when I'm bending these, I'm always hitting Control Z, because I never really want to put my character in like some crazy like weird pose and then not be able to get my character back to the pose that I started in. So I just go back to all of that. And you always want to try to get back to this pose when you're making these changes. So what I noticed on this one is that when I bend this, my character's knee is not staying sort of stuck to that gasket, and neither is this section up here. So I will go ahead and right click on this and go to Paint Skin Weights, and I'll choose my right knee, and just so I can paint on it and see it by itself, I can go to Show, Isolate Selected, View Selected. It's also Control 1. And now I can paint on the bottom of this to make sure that part stays. I can hold down B to adjust my brush size, and I can add a little bit more up to here as well, just to make sure that's sort of staying consistent. So most of that is going to bend with the knee. Now the hip, I want all of this stuff up here to go with the hip, so I want to make sure that I'm painting all of that white. And you'll see the areas I painted white earlier are now black. Now the reason I don't paint things black is because it may not put the weights for those vertices onto the joints that I want them to. It maybe would put them on the forehead or something like that instead. Which I guess my character doesn't have a forehead joint, but you get what I'm saying. So I'm just going to kind of add a little bit at a time. There we go. And so now when I go back and uncheck Isolate Selection and I rotate this, that deformation in the knee is a little closer to what I wanted. I'm getting a little bit of blow through right there, but I can fix that. So you do want to spend some time getting the soft and squishy parts of your skinning working a lot better. I'll tell you, not a lot of people really enjoy this part. This is time consuming and frustrating, and so that's another one of the reasons that I advised you not to make a fully organic character like a human, and to only stick to a character that has 2 legs. So spend a little time getting the skin weights working correctly on your character.